This is Off Topic, a show where two men with the attention spans of a squirrel try and fail to stay on topic with today's subject. Where will their oral meanderings take us? Well, stick around and listen, because today's Off Topic is... This is Off Topic, a show where two men with the attention spans of a squirrel try and fail to stay on topic with today's subject. Where will their oral meanderings take us? Well, stick around and listen, because today's Off Topic is... John Waters, the Pope of Trash, the Sultan of Sleaze, the Peoples Pervert, the Baron of Bad Taste, and now in his older years known as the Filth Elder. He was born on April 22nd, 1946 to parents John and Patricia Waters. And Nate, how much do you know about John Waters?
He exists.
Okay, that's...
I mean, I know him. I know, he's, quote unquote weirdo. And I hate using that. I hate that word, but he kind of embraces it. He drag queens, he's gay, hairspray. Yeah, I mean, he's he's kooky. That's weird mustache.
That's more or less what I knew. Basically what I knew about him is he's a director who did underground movies in the 70s, and then I thought he went on to do family comedies in the 80s and movies. And then during my research, I realized I was kind of combining John Waters and John Hughes, two people who are both directors named John, but are nothing alike.
Right? Not even close.
No, not even close. Turns out he did not direct a bunch of John Candy movies. So,
or Breakfast Club.
Or Breakfast Club. Yeah, I thought that was a John Waters movie, Breakfast Club, or 16 Candles. Yeah, I know. That's how far off base I was.
Yeah, those would have been way different.
Yeah, well, that's why I was like, wow, he started as a sleazy guy and then went to family movies. That's kind of neat. He's got range.
Could you imagine John Waters' Breakfast Club? Oh, man, that'd be...
Ooh, I would kind of like to see that.
To be honest, I would too. That'd be funny.
Yeah, it's also kind of made me realize that between John Hughes, John Waters, John Landis, and John Carpenter, there are too many directors named John in the 80s. We need to eliminate two. P.S. I am not a crackpot.
Well, John, this seems to be it's a very generic name. It's one of those things okay, quick, generic name for this generic character, John or
John,
Peter, or
John Doe.
Yeah, John or Joe. Yeah, legitimately John Doe.
Yep. So research for this episode involved watching a lot of interviews with him and doing a lot of reading. So he's good at telling stories. And randomly in the middle of all this talking, we're just going to pop in and just tell a quick little story that John Waters liked to share that I found amusing and or funny. And also, one thing I noticed too doing this research, John over the years has talked a lot about people he would have loved to have been over the years. He was like, during interviews, he's like, I would have loved to have been this person, or growing up, I always wanted to be this person. So I kind of made a small list of just a fraction of the people he brought up. Growing up, and later in life even, he wanted to grow up to become a beatnik, a greaser, Little Richard. He even said about Little Richard, he wanted to literally crawl up inside of his skin and wear him like a flesh suit and become Little Richard because it would freak out his parents and his grandma. Little Richard, also the person who inspired his pencil-thin mustache.
Let's say, when I thought Little Richard, I thought of the pencil-thin mustache.
Yep, that's exactly what he did, because he was like, hey, that is over the top and weird, and I like it. He also wanted to be Captain Hook. He wanted to be Johnny Mathis, who he says is the exact opposite of him, and that's why he wants to be Johnny Mathis. He also wanted to be the Wicked Witch of the West, Clarabelle from the clown from the Howdy Doody show, and he also wants to be Don Knotts, and he's willing to fight Steve Buscemi for the role of Don Knotts in a movie. And my brain has a hard time putting together John Waters and Steve Buscemi fighting in a steel cage. My brain's just refusing to be able to process that. I would like to see it, but
he might be too old now if they did Don Knotts. I don't know. Don Knotts got pretty old, but
makeup.
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah.
Whatever happened to Don Knotts?
He's dead.
I mean, he died. Nah. I mean, it's like they happened to everybody, but that was just 1 minute he was everywhere, and then he was like...
Yeah, he was a big staple of our childhood, and then, I don't know, mid-'80s, he just sort of disappeared.
I mean, he turned to a cartoon fish at one point.
Yeah, that's pretty much the last I remember of him.
Of course, always Andy Griffith,
Yeah, and he was in a few movies. According to his daughter, too, apparently he was quite the ladies' man, quite the poon hound.
Oh, I can see that.
Yeah, actually, I can, too.
I mean, no offense at all, but, with a face like his, and all of a sudden you get super famous, and all of a sudden you, you don't have to really try anymore.
Yeah.
I can totally
He's got time to make up.
Because, if you go from striking out right and left, and then all of a sudden you're hitting nothing but homers, you probably
I'm going to keep this lucky train rolling.
Yeah, until it stops happening.
So, also, John Waters says he gets confused by flight attendants all the time for being Steve Buscemi. They're like, really? Hello, Mr. Buscemi. He's like, sure.
I don't think they look that close. I mean,
neither do I, actually. I mean, they're just small and scrawny kind of guys, skinny.
I guess.
With kind of little mustaches. Occasionally, I've seen Buscemi kind of have a pencil-thin mustache, but that's not very often.
No, but Buscemi, the thing that stands out to him is his eyes and his teeth. And I just, when I think John Waters, I don't think eyes that like. Yeah, I know he has them, but I don't like. I'm not. Those don't stand out. You know.
So what we can assume is flight attendants might not be that smart sometimes.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Do not rely on them for eyewitness testimony.
Yeah, not to disparage, flight attendants.
Yeah,
because I mean that's a hell of a job. I wouldn't do it. You're up there like every day shooting up through a cannon through the not stars, through the sky, and dealing with people, of all types, and
who deals with people of all types? John Waters. Back to him. He grew up in the suburbs of Baltimore called Lutherville, and he loves the city of Baltimore. It's his home, and he understands why other people love Baltimore, but he cannot understand why anyone would ever move there willingly. He says it's a place where everyone thinks they're normal, but they are extremely weird. He likes to tell stories about Baltimore too, and here's a couple of them that I actually found kind of amusing. One of them he said that actually sums up Baltimore and its redneckness really well. He said he was walking down an alley after a rainstorm one day when he came across a little redneck girl in a tattered red dress playing in a mud puddle. As he walked by the girl, she looked up at him with a joyous look on her face and proclaimed to him, "I just drowned me a worm." John looked down at her and was just like, "Oh, you sweet, sweet young thing. Your story is just beginning, you little psycho."
Well, yes and no. You can't drown worms.
Well, yes. Okay, cool. You were a lot of fun at parties. Another story. This story he told about Baltimore just kind of made me laugh because this seems like something that would happen in one of the weird bars around here. He's just minding his own business, having a drink, when some dude just wandered up to him and unprovoked stated, "People think I'm a 30-year-old drug addict, but I'm really just a 40-year-old alcoholic. And John was just like, "That's the weirdest thing to say to a stranger."
Like, who are you?
Yeah, who are you and why are you saying that? I guess the conversation just kind of ended there. But his upbringing in Baltimore was actually pretty good. He was raised in a pretty strict Roman Catholic household. His parents constantly telling him all the ways to be good and prim and proper in society. And he said this was probably the best thing for his career and for him developing because his parents had taught him how to properly behave in society. And because he learned those rules, he knew exactly how to freak people out and how to break those rules. He went on to say that, you need to know the rules of taste before you can break them with wit, he said. And he's 100% correct on that. You get brought up prim and proper, you're like, I know how to freak these peoples out. And although his parents were pretty strict as far as manners and rules and bring him up in society kind of thing, they were actually very supportive of his weirdness and his movies. They didn't like his movies, but they were supportive of him.
Well, also, I mean, let's be real, I would think the same too. It's like, oh, I don't support you, but how much money are you making? Okay, well, I guess I'll forego my
Well, in all honesty, he did not make a lot of money until Hairspray came up, to be honest. He was kind of he said his early movies all the way up to through Pink Flamingos, he didn't become rich. He was being a hundred-air by that point. Yeah, well, we'll actually get into how broke he was kind of at times, because turns out they had to actually steal a lot of their stuff to shoot some of the early movies.
Yeah, I can see that. And I will say that I'm making that, I made that claim thinking about later John Waters, not, earlier John Waters.
Yeah, early on it was pretty rough for him. As most kids did back then, when he was a wee little one, he loved himself some Howdy Doody. Talk to anybody from that generation, everybody watched Howdy Doody, because it was one of two shows you had an option of watching back then.
Right, that terrifying puppet.
Yeah, oh, yep. Actually, Clarabelle and Flubadub the puppet, or Flubadub the puppet was one of his favorite characters, as was Clarabelle the clown, and he said those two were big fashion inspirations for him, because they just wore big, bright, colorful clothes and, big eye-catching ensembles. And, fun side fact, the original Clarabelle the clown went on to become the original Captain Kangaroo after a labor dispute.
Oh, there you go.
Yep. John Waters loved Howdy Doody so much that his parents would actually drive him from Baltimore to New York to see the Howdy Doody live as part of the studio audience. And he remembers the first time going there, and he was all excited to see puppets wandering around and, all the magic and strange, funny things that would be happening. And he walked in there, and his mind was blown when he realized there was nothing but cameras and cranky old Teamsters walking around chain smoking and yelling at people. And he looked around, he's like, oh my God, this show is all a lie. And this is glorious, a glorious, glorious lie. I must be part of this process to lie to people and create imagination. And yep, having the veil of Howdy Doody lifted is what got him going and interested in Hollywood. He also remembers from the recordings too, Buffalo Bob being really mean and yelling at the kids and telling them to shut up or they wouldn't get their Milky Way bar. They bribed the kids with candy.
Wow.
Yeah. Apparently the kids were not treated that great. It sounded like on the set. They're like, hey, if you don't do exactly what we're talking about, we will not give you your candy and we will kick you out and scream at you for a while. Probably even paddle your butt.
Well, back then, I mean, there'd be like a dead child in the street. That's kind of kicking to the side and get out of the way. I mean,
This is true.
let's be real. Like the children weren't exactly like
This kid was this kid an orphan we got, or did he have parents? He was an orphan. All right, we're fine. Just leave him there.
I mean, isn't this age where like I mean maybe I'm conflating, but like at the World's Fair they gave away a baby because with a raffle and no one knows what happened to it. I mean,
I never heard that story.
Oh yeah, totally. That actually happened, and
I believe that.
It was only within the last 30 years you weren't allowed to like ship children through the mail.
I did hear that it was kind of common to ship kids through the mail sometimes, even babies.
Time out. I forget. This is not the 90s. Probably last 50 years. let's say it's 2023. It's not
Actually, I was thinking when you said like 30 years, I was like, it sounds wrong, but I'll just go with it.
No, it is wrong.
Also, too, my brain when you said 30 years, my brain popped back kind of like the 50s or the 40s because we're talking about like the 70s right now.
I mean, there's like that's a show on Netflix where we're talking about oh man, what is it? It's the Japanese show about little kids going off on their own, like old enough. That's what it is. And actually, it's kind of interesting.
Yeah, Japanese show. Hope my kid comes back. I think is what
pretty well. They're being followed by a camera crew, but this fucking 3 to 5 year old kids going off like a mile away to the store and pick up stuff. I'm just like, good lord! And they're like, this show's been going on 30 years. I'm like, that's crap. And then there's also like, wait a minute.
Maybe there's a reason for this.
That's the 90s. Yeah.
All I can think of too is the kid does get kidnapped. You're like, the camera crew is there. What were they doing? Hey, we caught the whole thing on camera. They pulled up in a van, grabbed the kid, and took off. It was awesome. John Waters continued attending as many Howdy Doody showings as he could just because he loved puppeteering and puppets. Also, the 1953 movie Lily gave him an even bigger love of puppets. In fact, by the age of 12, he was doing puppet shows at birthday parties in the neighborhood for other kids. And basically, he started out with kind of a little Punch and Judy routine, two of them arguing back and forth, hitting themselves with sticks. And as he got more and more gigs and people more and more showed up for his shows, he started getting them more and more violent too and started to push the envelope. And this started getting parents slightly concerned. And eventually, when he started putting in fake blood into his little plays, and I mean like a lot of fake blood, like spraying fake blood everywhere. Yeah, the neighborhood kind of put a kibosh on his puppet stories. Because I guess it was like the point where he was like spraying kids with fake blood kind of stuff if he could get away with it.
Oh, that's fun. Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, because he was just like, I was able to spray this much blood and get away with it. What if I double the amount of blood? And yeah, he only got away with it for so long, but good time. And also, I don't know information, but he was getting paid for this too, actually, earning a little bit of money on the side.
As a Gallagher with blood.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, that'd be awesome. Just set the puppet down on the ground, pull out a big old hammer, just smash it, blood everywhere.
Man, I used to be like really fun at Gallagher, but all of a sudden out of nowhere, it's just he's disappeared, and then come to find out, like, he had a twin brother who was doing acts, pretending to be him.
Yeah, he like licensed out his name to a couple people, and yeah, it's weird. And then he like kind of went full Trump derangement syndrome at one point, I think.
Yeah, I think I remember you telling me about that.
Yeah, or something weird. And then you go back and watch his comedy, and you're like, oh, this wasn't that funny.
Yeah.
I don't know. But like you, I kind of liked him back like when I first saw him in, I don't know, 88 or 90 or whatever it was way back when.
Well, it's one of those things like, when you're starving and also someone gives you a cracker, you're like, oh my God, this is the best cracker ever.
Yeah, this is true. Yeah.
Yeah. But then when you have like actually, you eat a lot, all of a sudden someone gives you a cracker, like, it's fine.
Also, when you got like Netflix and you look up all sorts of comedians or YouTube, you're like, oh, wait a minute. That's trash. Another story about John being a weird, awkward child is one of his favorite pastimes to do was have his mom drive him to the local auto wrecking yard, where he'd gleefully track down cars that had been in accidents and try to come up with how and whys of these cars got into wrecks, if anybody died, and all the possible trauma that happened all around. Sometimes even he would take a hammer and smash up the car a little more to suit his story, break out all the windows and stuff, and be like, and this is where she flew out the window. Bah, ha, ha. Smash, smash, smash. Yeah, honestly, that sounds like something I would have done if I'd been able to get away with it.
Yeah.
Everybody, and the car caught on fire, and they screamed and ran out of it, and your parents are just like,
Yeah, free reign at a trash yard where there's cars, and you can smash it when you want. I guarantee, I do that now.
Yeah, honest God, I probably wouldn't do it now. They will yell at you, wrecking yards, if you do it. But yeah, it would be kind of fun to be like, bah, ha, ha. I'm going to go Street Fighter 2 on this car. Yeah, his parents were a little bit concerned because he remembers them asking his pediatrician if it was normal, and the pediatrician just responded, if he wants to smash up a car, just let him. That's the response John Waters remembers. Honestly, if you kind of like flip the way that's phrased, it almost sounds like a pediatrician who's just exasperated with too many questions. He's just like, If he wants to smash up a car, just let him. Stop asking me questions. Your kid's weird. Go away.
Right? Just, I mean, what a hell of a response. If your kid wants to smash up cars, just let him.
Yeah, right. And John Waters was phrasing like the pediatrician was just like, it's okay. But I picture more like the pediatrician just being like, I don't know. Your kid's messed up. Go away. Stop asking me questions. And this actually, so the parents just kept letting him do this, and it just kind of stoked the fires of weirdness.
Yay, weirdness.
Yeah. And as a bad guy also, too, kind of like you and me, he was a fan of the bad guys in cartoons and movies. He did not like the good guys. He said the bad guys seemed like they had so much more fun and also had better fashion sense. I agree with him on that. Both of them. Yeah, bad guys always seem to have more fun. They did. Good guys are always just so uptight and his holy trinity of characters from his youth. Rhonda Pinmark, the psychotic child who murdered people in the 1956 movie The Bad Seed, which I actually vaguely remember that movie. Captain Hook. He loved Captain Hook so much he actually jammed a coat hanger up his arm sleeve one year, and for the better part of a year, just like would walk around with the coat hanger poking out, pretend to be Captain Hook. His parents also not impressed, but supportive of that as well. And finally, the Wicked Witch of the West from The Wizard of Oz, who he thinks is probably one of the best villains of all time, and loves her fashion sense. And in fact, at the age of 10, he dressed like her for a party, and he says that's the only time he's ever dressed in drag. He likes drag queens, but apparently that's the only time he dressed in drag. I don't know, when you're 10, does that really count as a drag queen?
I don't think so.
Or is that just kid dressing as a witch? Yeah.
That's kid dressing up.
Yeah, that'd be my thought. And he said he didn't even want, it wasn't even dressed like a girl. He just wanted green skin and to wear a nice outfit.
Well, let me amend that. If a child is dressing up like I want to be dressing like a woman with the intent of like, this is me in a dress as a woman, then drag, sure.
Yeah.
But if it's me dressing up as a character I like that happens to be a woman,
Yeah, and I think the key word here is for a party. So it's not like he was just like, I'm going to go to the store dressed like this because this is my new look.
Right.
Yeah. He also said, thinks The Wizard of Oz is one of the greatest movies ever made with one of the worst endings ever. He calls it a very depressing ending where poor Dorothy goes back to her crappy home in Kansas instead of living in the wonderful land of Oz where she could have a pet monkey and a gay lion friend.
Right.
I'm with him on that too. I was even the first time I saw that, I'm like, why are you going back to that shithole where you're going to live in poverty on a dying farm and probably get polio? You go back to Oz where you live like a hero, have pet monkeys, and probably die of polio. They might have polio there still.
I mean, why would you go back there? They didn't. I mean, I'm not gonna say they were abusive to her, but they were very dismissive.
Yeah, it was like, everybody at Oz treated her better. Even the Wicked Witch, I think, treated her better than her parents did. It felt like.
Yeah, honestly, yeah. I mean, because at least the Wicked Witch treated her like she might not have been on our side, but she definitely was, treated her like a person.
Yeah, and at the beginning, she kind of did give her a chance to like join her side and give her the shoes and stuff, sort of ish. I mean, she could have been a horrible villain in that world if she wanted to. Another massive influence for John Waters was, remember those old schlocky horror movies from the 40s and 50s where they'd hire all those actors to do weird stunts and stuff? Director would show up in a casket in the back of a hearse and pop out and be like, "It's me!" Or
Mario.
Yeah, exactly. It's me, Mario. And they're like, who's Mario? And they're like, you'll know in 30 years, kids.
But real quick segue. The phrase "It's a me, Mario."
Yeah.
Apparently, that's actually that's our dumb not human, our dumb English speaking brains. Because we think Italians, it's like "It's a me, Mario." Because it's a me. Actually, it's "Itsumi," which is "I am" in Japanese. So he's saying I'm Mario. It's like, yeah, right?
Huh. I did not know that. That totally makes sense, though.
Yeah, it totally does. But
it's
like,
Mario. It's a me. Oh, yeah. Okay. Now I know that. I like that fun fact. More learning today.
That being said, if anybody's listening to this and they're like, that doesn't mean that, then feel free to write in. I saw on TikTok, I could be completely wrong.
Off-topic@gmail.com.
Right.
Because, yes, sometimes we are wrong, and we actively want to be corrected.
If you engage with us. If you listen to this podcast, you've noticed multiple times, I'm like, I could look something up, but I won't.
Yep. We'll just run with this plan. So, there was this one movie that was making the rounds back then. That it was when you showed up, you had to sign a release because you might die of fear in the theater. Remember those stories about that thing?
Yes, I remember those.
So, when John Waters was young and naive, he saw that coming to town. He got super excited because his thought was, hey, if they're making people sign releases, obviously people are dying during these things. Maybe not every showing, but people are dying. So he went to every showing and would just sit there and just stare at everybody in the audience to make bets with himself on who's going to die this time. And would be very disappointed when people would not die.
That's great marketing, but also
stupid. Also kind of stupid. But some of these things did have actually pretty clever stuff. Like he remembers one where during a certain scene, a skeleton on guide wires would come like swooping out from above the screen and shoot back to the projector room. Apparently that would actually scare some people because, not really expecting it.
Well, yeah, fair enough. I mean, that's not coming from the screen. That's like a jump scare from inside the theater.
Yeah.
That's what haunted houses were.
Yep.
I mean,
and then the Tingler came to town, and that was the one where they installed literally buzzers and shockers in the seats. John realized early on that because his theater in his local town was really podunk and small, they only installed buzzers in like every 7th or 8th seat. So he would just get there ahead of time and go crawling around on the floor trying to find which one had a buzzer, so he knew he'd get the full experience.
I must know.
Yeah. And he said that he loved the shock moments from these movies, and people, just screaming and freaking out and be like, "Oh God!" And people would apparently like get so scared at times they would puke during the showings. And he said that he really, really, from that point on, wanted nothing more than to shock people and scare people so much that they would get sick. And he said he kind of accomplished that coming up with Pink Flamingos. We'll talk about that scene shortly.
Well, I mean, the thing is, like, I don't know. The people back then also had a lower tolerance.
I believe that too.
It's like, oh my God, that scared me to death. I'm like,
yeah, right. It's like,
like, like,
and also it's probably a small percentage of people that got that freaked out. I'm sure there's plenty of people that are just like,
yeah, or the whole thing, like, what was it? The spider from the Ewok movie. Oh my God, it's so realistic.
Yeah, it's terrifying. Actually, apparently in the original King Kong, and during the test screenings, there was a scene where they had people fall off like a rope bridge, and down below there's a bunch of stop motion giant spiders that ate them. And I guess that scene was so horrifying that people only talked about that after the movie, so they actually had to cut it from King Kong because they realized it was overshadowing the main character.
Lame.
Yeah, I know. I really want to see that scene. Who knows if it actually exists anymore?
Oh, I'm sure it's somewhere. I mean, you know what? I say that, but from back in the day, there's been so many.
Also, film back then was day too. Yeah, so they reused film if they could at times.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking either a fire or just
or just disintegrated from time.
Right. I mean, it's not exactly like they were preserving these things with the best quality stuff.
So one of John's early formative things in his youth was when he was at Catholic school, the nuns pulled him aside and they knew he was into movies. And they told him that there was one movie he should never, ever even think about seeing. Because if he saw it, it's a one-way trip to hell, Nate. Instantly, boom, you go in that theater, you're going to hell, son.
Exorcist.
Nope. This is in the 50s.
Okay.
Yep. So, what happens when you tell somebody like John Waters, you're going to hell if you see this movie? Of course, he runs out to see this movie. This movie actually was, in fact, banned in many places and was very, very controversial. And the reason it's so controversial is because back then it was one of the only, if not maybe the only movie touring around that you go see that actually had full frontal nudity, which was a huge no-no back in the day. It had full shots of genitalia and everything. How'd they get around the standards of this time? They showed medical footage of live births and various STDs to get around the full frontal nudity thing, and thus they were educational films. The thing was to...
Movie starts off, they're like, look at this, a baby being born. Look at this cadaver. Now we got that out of the way. Sex.
That's pretty much it. Actually, the sex was the birth. There wasn't any actual sex in it, I don't believe. It was just like people would sit around in the theater just to watch a lady give birth just so they could see a hoo-ha.
Wow.
Yeah, and the thing was...
people.
Yep, but the thing was, this film was popular enough that it ran through the 40s and 50s, and it made $40 million in back then money. Yeah, $40 million. Wow. And this was just kind of an underground thing. And Waters noticed when he went to see this that he thought the movie was kind of gross, naturally, because, it's like, hey, here's a penis with chlamydia kind of stuff. But John Waters looked around and he noticed it was all men, and it was all men who kind of like zoned out, except for when the nudity scenes would show up, and then they would just promptly get all horny and start beating off. And he's like, yes, dudes were sitting there watching a woman give birth, like in an educational film, and whacking it. Times were different back then.
Serious.
Yeah. And this kind of influenced him on the fact that he was like, hey, man, people will get excited and watch almost anything if it's like forbidden,
Yeah.
If it's something the censors don't want you to see, people will go out of their way to go watch it. So that kind of influenced him. Then, in his teenage years, his grandma gave him an 8mm video camera and said, hey, you like movies? Go nuts, kid. Make yourself some movies. And he did. So he started making friends in high school and some high school adjacent friends. And they started making movies together.
The high school adjacent friends.
Yeah, well,
who will forget their first high school adjacent friend?
Yeah, the ones that buy them beer, I'm guessing, is probably what this was, or supplied them with weed. He actually, what it was is he knew some people from high school, and also there were some from like college film schools that kind of like overlapped. So yeah,
Gotcha.
yeah. So everybody was kind of around the same age here, except for a few outliers. But this original cast and crew would go on to be known as the Dreamlanders, after the name of their production company, Dreamland Productions. Fun fact too, everybody's going to call them Dreamlanders. John Waters and crew, everybody calls them Dreamlanders. They never called themselves that. That was something the press made up for them. Everybody thinks that they called themselves Dreamlanders. Yeah, they're like, we never called ourselves Dreamlanders. The press made that up. We just called ourselves Friends. But they were like, their impression was like, they weren't that big on it, but they're like, they could call us a lot worse things, so we'll just let that one stick.
Yeah, dude. I mean,
that's not... Yeah. I mean, they weren't offended by it, but everybody's like, wow, you call yourself the Dreamlanders? Like, well, no, but whatever.
It's like, okay, how about these derogatory terms? Okay,
yeah,
we'll go with
exactly. They could. There's a lot of worse things they could have called him back then. Among these friends was Harris Glenn Milstead, who would be go on to be known as the famous drag queen Divine, who John Waters famously calls the most beautiful woman in the world. Almost. John Waters also said about Divine, beauty is looks you can't forget, and that's Divine. I've seen car accidents happen over Divine's looks. Of course, talking about Divine being in full drag. Yeah, there's actually a scene of Pink Flamingos where they're like in a car following her down the street, walking around in full drag with a camera. And man, people are just stopping and staring like, what the hell is that? Because think about Divine. You know what Divine looks like, right?
Yes.
Okay. And Ursula was based off of Divine. Like, it's basically a 1-for-1. They look almost identical. Basically, Divine was the very first drag queen that looked that way. Before that, all drag queens, there was definitely drag queens around, but they wanted to look like their moms, all prim, proper housewives, nice permed hair, wearing pretty dresses and heels, and Divine was just like, screw that. I'm just going full over the top. I'm going to shave my head and put on a big old poofy wig and giant makeup and eyebrows, and I just want to scare people. In fact, John Waters says that mostly the Divine character was invented to scare hippies, because I guess hippies weren't as quite as tolerant as you would think about drag queens back then. John Waters does not like hippies. He kind of talks down about them a lot. Says they're too militant and kind of set in their ways.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, him and Divine actually lived down the road from a hippie commune at one point, and they were so militant anti-meat eaters, like, I mean, go out of their way to make you miserable if they thought you ate meat, that if they had extra money, they would go to the meat market, buy a buttload of meat, and just leave it on their doorstep just to piss them off, so they'd have to clean it up and touch it. Yeah, he considered himself and his friends yippies, which is a term I never really heard before. But he calls it an anti-hippie, someone who uses snark and humor to change the system instead of love and music. I'd say snark and humor probably does work better than love and music.
Yeah, but I mean, let's be real. It's not love and music. You know, it's if you're being that shitty to people, then love is just like love for your own kind or people who think like you. You know, that's
intolerance wrapped in a mask of love.
Right. I mean, that's the thing. Like, it's the intolerance part. That's the reason why he hates hippies.
Yeah, exactly. Because there were a lot of hippies that was like, hey, if you're not exactly like us in any way, you're a conformist, man.
I mean, if you're against people like, I don't know, like, I don't want to get too political in here, but you know, if you're against people who support policies that end up with people dying or being miserable, then I definitely have my biases towards certain people who believe certain things. But like, come on, man, if you're being a hippie, you're hating on people who are also like not part of the mainstream. You know, like these people they're being, you're being shitty, like you're being shed on by society, and there's another group that's also being shed on by society. You know,
punch up, not across.
Yeah, thank you, or down, or whatever. Just like, you know, that's the issue I have.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. It's like, hey, you guys are all on the same side. Maybe you should not fight each other and face forward and find a common goal. Another fun story that also influenced John a lot in his movie making. He told a story about where him and Divine would skip school and head downtown to see one of the last old school burlesque vaudeville style shows you could see around Baltimore. You know, one of those where they just had all sorts of stripping and high wire acts and drinking and weird stuff. And apparently since it was kind of a dying industry, they had no qualms about letting in any ages, no matter what. They were just like, oh, kid, you want to come in? Your money's good. Fine, go sit down. He remembers one act that he said was one of the greatest acts he ever seen, and he loved it. It was about a lady whose stage name was Zorro, and he said she basically looked like Johnny Cash. And she would come out on the stage just completely nude. No striptease, no nothing. So you got a nude female Johnny Cash up there. And her whole shtick, she would just start pointing at dudes in the crowd and be like, "What are you looking at? What are you looking at? You like this? You want some of this? What are you looking at?" That was her whole shtick, and people loved it. She got standing ovations, people throwing money on the stage, people cheering. Yeah, sounds
That
weird,
sounds like
but
I mean, there had to be more than that. It has to be more than that because that's so boring.
this is, well, it depends, because I mean, you got to picture her not being very attractive too, and being all gruff and just like waving her tits angrily at people. I can picture it being kind of amusing. Also, keep in mind, this is probably the same crew that was also just recently watching a VD film and jerking off. So,
I guess.
yeah, these might not be the biggest standards of quality type people. All right, we're going to fast forward to 1964 when John Waters decides to finally make his first ever movie, which was a short film called Hag in a Black Leather Jacket. Catchy title, huh? The plot? A KKK member marries a black woman and a white woman atop the roof of his parents' house. That is John Waters' parents' house. KKK member marrying an interracial couple.
Yay.
Yay. And he even managed to talk his mom into letting them use her wedding dress for the video, and they shot it on top of his parents' house. The movie was made on a budget of $30, and they were only able to make it for that cheap because they literally just stole the film to make it. And everything else was just invested in props and probably developing the film. Way after they got it made up, John managed to get it shown in a beatnik coffee house once, and no one paid attention. Not one person even watched the video. It just like played on the wall, and that was it.
That's painful.
Yeah, it kind of is. He also says, with this movie too, he kind of wishes he realized that editing was a thing, because he was young enough at that time. He just kind of assumed that whatever you shot is what you put on a movie. He said that whatever went on film just went straight on the screen. And he said it was Dogma 1995, but ahead of its time in that regard. Unsure what that means. It sounds like a Kevin Smith reference.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that is
Dogma 95, not a lot of editing going on.
I don't know. I mean, I thought so. I mean, I don't know. Listen to Kevin Smith, recently being, last several years or decade or whatever. He calls himself an editor. He's like, he loves editing. So every time he talks about a movie, when he reviews something, he's like, "Oh, I would have cut this, I would have cut that." So I mean,
so it sounds like he's overcompensating for not editing enough in his youth. Gotcha.
Maybe, I guess. I don't know.
So many people yelled at me for not editing my early movies right.
I mean, I like Kevin Smith, but I'm not like well versed.
Yeah, I just ask you because I know you know more about Kevin Smith than me.
Yeah, fair.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen Dogma and Jay and Silent Bob Strikes Back and maybe like one other of his movies. I like him. It's just, I don't know. I've just never gotten around to watching him.
Yeah, I've seen a decent chunk of them. I think I didn't see like Yoga Hosers, and I didn't see
some like Tusk or some of them.
Tusk, and I mean, I've heard, I don't know, like I was actually listening to. It's funny because I was listening to his podcast while he was making those and while he was releasing those, so I heard like kind of like the making of, if you will, while he was doing it. And I also even heard the original, because Tusk was based off of a conversation he had on a podcast with his friend, what's his face? It doesn't matter. And they were talking, like, they were like, go just kind of riffing like we do. And they went off on this whole tangent about like some guy who captures someone, turns into a walrus. It's all based on some news article they saw. And that spun off into that movie. And they've made the whole movie based on, apparently at the end credits of Tusk, they play clips of that conversation that led to the movie, which it's all fine and dandy, but I've also heard the movie's terrible.
The best thing I've heard about that movie is it was interesting. I think it was the best comment I heard about it.
Yeah, I mean, and he got Johnny Depp to do it, and because apparently Johnny Depp's daughter is best friends with his daughter, so they were together. He just kind of said, "Hey, I'm not, this is gross, and if you don't, this makes you uncomfortable, feel free to just like ignore me." But he's like, "I have this role." And he gave him the script, and apparently Johnny Depp called him up. Was like, "Are you fucking serious? Like, are you really going to do this? Like, this is ridiculous. Are you really going to make this movie?" He's like,
"I'm in.
I'm in." Exactly what it was. Like,
that sounds like Johnny Depp. It was also a good friend with Johnny Depp. John Waters, actually. We'll get into that in a few. Yeah, actually, they became good friends during shooting Crybaby.
That makes sense because he was in Crybaby, and Johnny Depp's. I mean, it's definitely not a 1-to-1, but Johnny Depp is good buddies with Tim Burton, who's also
and that's kind of that whole little weirdo crew kind of thing. I mean, weirdo in the most loving way possible, of course.
Totally.
So the lack of success of Hag in a Black Leather Jacket did not dissuade John from making more short films. Next up was the movie Roman Candles. At that time, everybody was looking up to Andy Warhol because he was the king of the underground movies at the time. And he was making an experimental movie called Chelsea Girls that involved showing two movie reels side by side to tell its story. Naturally, John Waters wanted to be a one-upper, and he said, we're going to do that, but with 3 film reels. The film more or less was just a bunch of short, unrelated skits and movies, basically just him and his friends screwing around, nothing too interesting. Some of them was actually footage of John and Divine legit shoplifting thieves from a department store.
Oh, wow.
It turns out one way Dreamlander supported their movies was by shoplifting what they needed and selling what they stole or using the stolen stuff in the movies. And much of the early John Waters movies had actual real soundtracks with real produced music. Yeah, he didn't have the rights to those. It was all records he stole over the years.
Am I to assume that they didn't use that as evidence against him? What proof do you have we stole this? Well, let's see.
Yeah. Well, as far as I know, outside of a few art houses, that movie never really got shown. He'll show it at some of his film festivals, but not many people have actually really seen it, I don't believe. And also as far as getting sound records and for the soundtracks, John Waters actually had a special record stealing coat he would wear. It had pockets that were big enough to fit a whole LP inside of them. You just slide a whole record in there, and he got really good at it. But there was this one time, as he was stealing a record, he noticed the security guard. She looked over and saw him sliding the record into his pocket. And he panicked and, a second later put the record back. But she did not see him put the record back. So as he was leaving the department store, he got tackled and arrested. They couldn't find a record on him. So he was like, hey, this is false imprisonment or false arrestment. And he got a $3,000 settlement out of this that he went on to use to make more movies with.
Nice.
In fact, that year that he got busted, he was a teenager and his parents were like, well, John, it's the summer. Are you going to get a summer job so you have money to make your movies? And he's like, I won a lawsuit. I got $3,000. I don't need to do nothing. Parents, not really impressed with that, but still supportive.
Right. Well,
like, our boy's going to go get a job this summer. Oh, he won a lawsuit for what?
Something he was completely guilty of, but realized he was getting caught. So he was smart enough to get rid of the evidence.
Yeah, exactly. That was good luck on his part. So yeah,
I love you think later on in life, when he starts telling the story, eventually the security guard hears it. It's like, I fucking knew it.
Yeah, right. I knew that son of a bitch cost me my job.
Yeah, she probably did caught me. He sued and won. She didn't keep that job.
Yeah, probably not. So all those records he stole, they started using them in all their early movies, even up through Pink Flamingos. They were using those stolen records. And in case you're wondering how he got away without using those with having the license for them, he really didn't. He did for a lot of years until the 90s when he started getting more popular, and all of a sudden the MPA or the music industry was like, hey, we noticed you don't have licenses for a lot of these songs. It cost him somewhere between, from what he was saying, $25 to $30,000 per song that he used in those movies. So it was kind of expensive.
I mean, that's the key word. Is until you get noticed. They
will find you eventually.
Yeah, you do all this stuff to get noticed. Then finally you're noticed. That's when also wait a minute.
This is also why one of his early movies, Mondo Trasho, will never get an official release because he said it will cost him over $1 million just to pay for all music licensing in it. Because essentially that movie is basically, I believe, it's just nonstop a music track underneath with some overdubbing. Yeah, because recording audio was kind of tricky back in the day. At one point, tried to make a movie, I think it was called Dorothy Stoner of Kansas, and they were trying to film it while recording on a little tape deck at the same time and sync it all up. That didn't work. They shot that movie for about a half hour and then gave up.
So that's literally half hour worth the footage, and they toss the whole thing.
Yeah, they're just well, this syncing up isn't working. Let's forget this. John doesn't even really remember what the movie is about. Something about Dorothy probably being stoned.
Yeah, I mean, I hope so.
Yeah, right.
It's it was oh yeah, it's called Dorothy Getting Stoned. Meanwhile, it was about it was a remake of the original incarnation of Philadelphia.
Talking to the Tin Man's, I have AIDS.
Right.
Should have wrapped your funnel better, baby.
This turned dark.
Yeah. Next movie from John Waters is going to be Eat Your Makeup. And it's going to be his first film on 16mm film. This is a story about a nanny who kidnaps young girls and forces them to model themselves in front of her boyfriend and his friends until they die. Bum, bum, bum.
Wait, I'm assuming there's other violence than just on the modeling. I can't get off the catwalk. Where?
I think it's just they go until they're exhausted. They also force them to eat makeup. I wasn't able to find a copy of this movie to watch. So
that would do it.
But yeah, the description was basically just forces them to model until they die. I'm assuming pass out from exhaustion, I guess.
Well, I mean, if they're captured and the only thing they have to eat is makeup, then eventually it would, they would die, I guess.
This scene actually got a little bit of press because there's a scene where Divine plays Jackie O and recreates the Kennedy assassination while in full drag.
Oh, that's
some
awesome.
people, some people found this a little tasteless because the actual assassination only happened a few years prior.
Yeah,
it was only a couple
can see
years
that.
after. Yeah, and people were like, ugh. Fun side story from this movie. The dress that Divine was wearing, the Jackie O dress, was like completely covered in fake blood, and he stuffed it into his parents' trunk of their car. And one day, he kind of forgot about it, and his mom opened up the trunk and was like, What's this bloody dress in the back of the car?" And Divine got really frightened. He was all stoned and was like, I'm Jackie Kennedy, Mom, and then just ran off. And the parents were like, huh, all right then. And they just dropped it after that. They didn't know at this point that Divine was into drag.
Oh, that's funny. Well, he would be Divine if that wasn't, if his, I mean, I don't know what Divine's real name is. I'm sure you do.
Glenn Harris Milstead.
Glenn, okay.
I was actually trying to say Glenn a minute ago, but I could not think of the name.
Was he an assassin? Because there's 3 words, 3 names.
Serial killer. Good question. Yeah, I don't know why I put down third middle name. Oh, do you know why they do that? The middle name for serial killers?
To make them stand out.
Kind of. It makes it harder to confuse it with people who have the normal name. Because I mean, there's probably like 5,000 Ted Bundys out there, but if you know,
fair.
Name. Yeah,
well,
or John Wayne Gacy. Actually, I just said that, and I'm like, wait, man, there's no middle name for Ted Bundy.
Wait, what is Ted Bundy's real name?
Yeah. Okay, John Wayne Gacy would be a much better example of this. Apparently, there's not that many Ted Bundys out there.
Well, not anymore. If your last name's Bundy, like the last thing you would name your kid is Ted. I'm taking the name back. Like, no.
We all got 2 things we can name our kid: Ted or Al.
Right. Let's flip a coin.
Yeah. It also kind of popped in my head watching some of this early footage of John Waters and kind of his looks and the way he be and his attitude. He kind of gives me off a Jonan Vasquez vibe, you know, that too cool for school, I'm a outside hipster kind of thing.
Yep.
Yeah, you kind of get that. Yeah, if you actually look in the chat, I actually popped up a picture of him as he's young under the general thing, I think. Because, I'm not saying I met John Vasquez a lot, but I met him twice at a convention, and you kind of get the same vibe off the two. I guess you should say Jonan Vasquez has a John Waters vibe, since one is very much older than the other.
Is it the black and white one?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, I see it, yep.
Yeah. We'll get into what the other 2 pictures are in a moment.
I'm about to say, what the hell is going on in the other pictures?
We will get to that in just a moment. Okay, and after this movie came John Waters' first full-length film, Mondo Trasho, the one we were just talking about with too much music in it for them to ever release it. This plot is basically a lady known as Bombshell rides around with Divine in Baltimore and experiences weird stuff like foot fetishes and the Mother Mary blessing people. And again, this doesn't have a lot of dialogue. It's mainly just music cues and like overcut dialogue on top of it. You know, it's not good from what I saw. There's only a few clips out there. I saw the one where Divine's praying to the Mother Mary. It's basically a scene of Divine like rolling around on the floor praying to somebody dressed as Mother Mary, saying, "Oh God, oh God. Oh God, oh God, oh God, Mother Mary, oh God, save me, oh God, oh God." That goes on for like 3 or 4 minutes.
Insane, batshit things like Mother Mary blessing people. What? No.
Yeah. But if you actually see the scene, it's kind of weird.
Oh, hell, your description of it sounds weird.
Yeah, it's kind of one of those things, too. I'm guessing if you went to Catholic school at the time, you would find it even more funny because, there's some kind of out there Catholics at times who go a little overboard with their worship of Mary.
You think?
Yeah. Yeah, okay, you know exactly what I'm talking about. That's kind of what that scene was about with John
I wasn't
Waters
raised Catholic. I did the whole conversion thing, the Catholicism. So like I saw a little bit of that. I mean, I saw plenty of that when I was Baptist. Now that I'm atheist, it's like it's all ridiculous. But
this movie was also Mondo Trasho, that is. John Waters is not a huge fan of it. He wishes he made it into a short film instead of a full-length one. Says there's way too much filler. But this movie was also notable of it got most of the crew arrested, including John Waters, for conspiracy to commit indecent exposure.
What?
There's this one scene where Divine is driving around in like a 65 convertible Cadillac, and she pulls over, picks up a nude hitchhiker. And as they're setting up for that scene, neighbors saw that and called the police thinking it was going to be like a prostitution thing was going on outside their house. So as they're starting to shoot the scene, Divine pulls up to go pick up the nude hitchhiker. The cops come whipping in, hop out of their cars and start yelling at everybody. Everybody got arrested except for Divine, who saw everything happen in the rearview mirror and just floored it and just got the hell out of town.
Yeah, that was correct.
that was correct too. And John Waters was like, I'm surprised they didn't catch her because it's a drag queen that looks like Divine driving a convertible Cadillac. It seems like that wouldn't have been hard to find.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You mean
but
that
apparently
giant
they
thing
just
with
didn't try
neon
very
lights on
hard.
it? Oh, yeah.
Yeah. This was also the movie where the Dreamlanders dubbed Divine the Hog Princess. Because there's one scene that I guess they were driving around and they noticed a farmhouse off to the side of the road. And next to this farmhouse was a pig pen, a big, muddy, shit filled pig pen. And they decided, hey, wouldn't it be fun to have Divine crawl around in a big pile of pig shit for one of our scenes? So they decided to do that. And they pulled over, just pulled over, pulled out a camera and said, Divine, get in that mud and start rolling around. And as Divine was rolling around in the mud, having a good old time, all of a sudden, two of the pigs in the pen just started just going at it with each other, just humping madly. And all of a sudden, everybody looked at this side and goes, Divine must make pigs horny. Therefore, she can be called the Hog Princess. The nickname really didn't stick past that scene, but, they thought that was funny. Even better, though, was the fact that John Waters was discussing the fact that he wonders what the family inside that house was thinking watching that go on, because he said there was cars there was lights on, and the house was probably like 30 feet away, and there's no way they didn't see a bunch of hippies and a drag queen playing around in their pig pen. Like, the thing is, they're just like, no, Martha, just let them bond themselves out. They're weird hippies that way. Just let them do their thing.
The hippies are back.
Yeah. He's very glad they didn't call the cops, too. Maybe they were into that kind of stuff. Who knows? But that was something they did a lot in their movies. They never asked for permission. They're like, hey, we're just going to show up, trespass, do our thing, and hope we get out before the cops show up. Also, weird random side fact about John I learned that he talks about a lot. His favorite drug? Poppers. Those little inhalants that you can get? Okay, those are his favorite things. He likes to do them on roller coasters and while doing stuff like grocery shopping.
Poppers?
Yeah, poppers. They're a vasodilator. Apparently, you take a big old inhale and they give you a huge head rush.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, you can buy them in like sex shops and online. Which, interesting. Also, he likes weed and LSD. But poppers, he says that's his go-to drug, even though he hasn't done them since like the 80s. Also, as far as John Waters' substances, his only regret in life, smoking. He says at one point in life, he was smoking up to 4 packs a day. And the thing that actually got him to quit is kind of a weird story. It was after a movie premiere, and he ran out of cigarettes, and he was jonesing real bad for a smoke, like no other. So he went up to a homeless person and asked him if he could have a drag off their cigarette. And the homeless person, as they're handing the cigarette, gave him a big old wing. Was like, "Yo, want to sip off of my soda too, there, sweetheart?" And he said he felt so awkward, so low at the moment, asking to take a drag off a homeless person's cigarette. He decided to quit at that point. And now he actually, every day, he writes down on a little card how many days he's been quit and carries that around in his pocket. And if he could also send one note back to his young self, it would be, don't smoke, but do everything else the same. Yep. So, yeah, 4 packs a day. That's a lot. And I actually saw an interview where he was showing off his apartment. And, yeah, like every time he walked by an ashtray, he'd immediately reach over and grab out a cigarette and just start just taking big old drags off of it. That dude was a smoker.
Yeah, sounds like.
Yeah.
I mean, I know I struggled for a little bit. And then, I don't know, my body just started rejecting it. So,
yeah. And he got out when you're still young and good.
Yep.
1970 brought us a couple of movies of his. First, the Diane Linkletter story, based off of the suicide of Art Linkletter's daughter. The morning papers basically had a story about Diane Linkletter's suicide, and John and the crew had some new camera equipment to test out, and they're like, hey, let's see if we can make a little skit about this. So they went out, improv and riffed for a little bit, and didn't really come up with a movie, but just kind of a dumb little short film testing out their new equipment called. And then the second movie, Multiple Maniacs, was his quote-unquote first full-length talkie film, meaning actual real dialogue instead of layered over, as in it's actually them talking on screen, not just, voicing.
Gotcha.
Yeah, okay.
So was no talking in his prior films?
There was talking, but it wasn't the actual actors talking on screen and them being recorded. It was them like pantomiming and doing like, basically miming all the stuff. Well, you could tell it's very obviously something they recorded days after the fact being piped in.
I gotcha. I know what you mean. I've seen Mystery Science 3000. I know what you mean.
Yeah. I mean, they were talking in the films, but it wasn't actually them talking in time, memorizing lines and recording it. Like the Divine Mother Mary thing is basically just her being like, ooh, making like kind of like ooh, ah faces while the dialogue's going on. If that makes more sense. Or maybe I just confused you even more.
Nope, I got it.
Okay. Multiple Maniacs is about a freak show that's run by Divine. It's free to attend, but at the end, she robs you. Then Divine gets bored with this concept and moves on to killing people at the end of the freak show. And that's kind of just it. She just accelerates from robbing people to killing people. This movie also does have some weird stuff, including uh, some anal rosary action and some cannibalization. The infant of Prague shows up for some reason too. And also one scene where I can probably only use this term legitimately once in my life. It features rape lobster. Yep, there's a scene where a surprisingly well-made for its budget lobster has its way with Divine. Yes.
Well, there you go.
Great. Yeah, there you go. And it should be noted, John came up with this idea well on LSD. He was hanging out at the beach, and over near him was a billboard, and it was one of those billboards that's like, visit Baltimore, and it had like a big cartoon lobster on there, like having a cookout or something. And as he was high on acid, he saw that and was like, huh, lobster rape. I should put that in a movie. Yeah. LSD.
and so it was done.
And so it was done. Yeah, it's interesting. Everything about these movies is interesting. That movie actually ends with Divine trying to kill everyone in Baltimore before being gunned down by the National Guard to the tune of America the Beautiful.
So Divine in the lobster?
No, not the lobster. The lobster had its way with Divine. And then after that, Divine went around trying to kill everybody in Baltimore. Probably post-lobster trauma.
Yeah, that lobster really did a number.
Yeah, it really did. And while they were making this movie, Mondo Trasho was actually making his round and getting a lot more popular. The movie we were just talking about with all the stolen film tracks and not that much actual talking in it. And eventually this movie made its way into the hands of a dude named Bob Shea. And Bob Shea was starting up a new company that you might know called New Line Cinema. You know that name?
Never heard of it.
New Line Cinema. They have made such movies as the Lord of the Rings movies and a million others. I know you're lying to me.
I am lying to you.
Yeah, I know. And back then, however, their main income was just distributing copies of Reefer Madness to college campuses. That was basically all they did, and maybe put out the occasional tiny little film that didn't do anything. Well, Bob Shea got a copy of Mondo Trasho, and he was like, hey, I kind of like the cut of your jib, John. You go out and you make something that's a more higher budget with more money and a little bit better, and I'll actually distribute it for you. We can get something going together. So John went to his parents and said, hey, I need $12,000 to make one of the most perverse movies you will ever see. And they said, okay. And with $12,000, thus 1972's Pink Flamingos, probably John Waters' most memorable film. Possibly one of the most memorable films of all time, too.
Never seen it.
If I watched it. This is one of those things, if I saw it when I was really young, I probably would have been disgusted by it, but seeing it as an adult, I was infinitely amused by how weird and just out there deviant it was. This is the movie where Divine... this is the movie where Divine is the filthiest person in the world. A title which she earned just by being herself. And apparently in this form of the world John Waters is spinning, the filthiest person in the world is an actual title that you can win, and it's something that shows up on magazines of like Deviant Monthly and this and stuff. She does this stuff by living her life and doing things like, to start it out, there's a scene where she goes into a meat mart. She buys a steak, and to carry the steak home, she literally just like takes and just jams it up her dress and holds it between her legs to take it home and feed it to her family. She does a lot of stealing and making fun of people and shooting people. And I don't know, just a lot of weird deviant things. And including one thing at the end that gets really odd. We'll talk about it.
Is there a plot?
Yeah, actually, she's got the title of the most filthy person in the world. However, her title is soon challenged by a degenerate couple who want to become the nastiest, filthiest people in the world and take over her role. But they do it by she does it. The moral of the story is basically Divine does it by natural ways, by being herself. Whereas the quote unquote bad guys who are trying to steal the title do it by, being tryhards who aren't really that nasty, but they just want to pretend to be. However, the degenerate couple do things like kidnap women and have them impregnated by their manservant, and then they sell the babies to lesbian couples for money. Then they use those profits from that to finance heroin dealers in elementary schools. In fact, you can get a...
It seems overly complicated.
It kind of does, yeah. It seems like you could cut out one of those things.
Yeah, I mean, that's what we're also not being really nasty. It's being like a shitty person.
Yeah. They even show the part where they kidnap women and throw them into a pit with their manservant. And the way he impregnates him is he actually jacks off into his hand and then takes a syringe and fills that up with the cum and then just jams that little injector into the women. They basically just have this pit of women that they keep knocking up and stealing their babies and selling them.
Fun.
Yeah, and this is stuff that they actually do show. There's another scene too where, okay, so the degenerate couple, they hire some chick to go investigate Divine's family and try to get dirt on her. They're like, we want you to go date her son and find out everything you can from her son. And she's like, well, you're going to have to pay me good money because their son has some very, very deviant sexual things that I'm going to have to take part in. They're like, all right, here's your money. Go do what you got to do. The very next scene, she's with their son, her Divine's son, and they're having sex, full naked sex, with one a live chicken and a dead chicken in between them. Basically, they went out and they got a dead chicken for them to have sex with like its actual head is cut off. You can see this one chicken in between them with its head missing. And then to the side of them, like the dude's holding onto a live chicken who looks very confused with what's going on. Occasionally, that poor chicken like looks at the camera being like, record scratch, you'll never guess how I got here. But yeah, I mean, literally, they are having a sex scene with a dead chicken in between them and like holding an actual chicken. And she's like, oh, yes, do me. He's like, I love chickens and eggs. There's kind of an egg theme with that family, too. Because I kind of like this one scene because it brings up some other fun stories involved in John Waters' day-to-day activities. Divine's mom is played by this Dreamlander named Edith Massey. And if you look back at those pictures I showed you, you see the old lady in the crib? Or older lady in the crib? Yep. That is Edith Massey. And first of all, she basically plays this role where she's basically a giant woman baby, and she just hangs out in the crib yelling at Divine, be like, Divine, where's the egg man? I want my eggs. I need my eggs. Because there's this traveling egg salesman who comes by who sells all grades and all types of eggs. And he's romancing this big elderly baby lady. And spoiler alert, eventually they do get married at the end. It's kind of sweet. But
I object.
Yeah.
It was not sweet. Objection.
As far as this movie goes, it was sweet. Trust me. But because she plays this role of kind of like a simpleton, there's some rumors early on of her being mentally disabled and the crew taking advantage of her. Because they're like, oh, obviously they have to keep her in a pen to keep her from escaping kind of stuff. That kind of dumb thing.
Yeah.
Which John Waters responded, he's like, do you think she could have remembered her lines if she was that disabled? Oh yeah, one thing about this movie too is there are some like decently long lines of dialogue for people to remember in this. I mean, we're talking like several minutes of back and forth dialogue. Apparently, too, John Waters is kind of an ass during recording this, so like if they even flubbed up a syllable, he would like get all pissed off and start screaming and make them redo everything.
Yeah, that's shitty.
Yeah, kind of shitty. But also, Edith Massey, another story. She was actually, because of her looks and the roles she played, she was one of the favorites of all the fans. One fun story John Waters liked to tell about her is she ran a thrift store in Baltimore. And it was a thrift store that went solely on donations. And during the summer months, not a lot of people would be donating, giving her stuff. So she wouldn't have a whole lot of things to sell. So in her clever way, she would start pulling stuff out of the trash, like bottle caps and paper clips that were bent up and other various things that she was just throwing away. She would gift wrap each of these things and put them in a big bin and just be like, mystery surprise pack, 25 cents. And all the neighborhood kids would be like, ooh, what's that? You might get a prize, kids. And the kids would just open them up and it'd always be garbage every time. And when they would be confused or mad, she would just look at them and be like, oh, sweetheart, you can't be lucky every time. So that's how she, yeah, right. Every one of them was junk, though.
I see that.
Yeah.
It reminds me, there's was an indoor flea market, like a Peddler's Mall, like here in town.
Mm-hmm.
And they have this room. You go in there, everyone has things. There is this room full of boxes, like random boxes, all taped up. And they're like, "Okay, you was it like $25 or $50 for a box? About you don't know what's in there?" I'm like, no,
right? That. Yay! They're like, it's worth at least $50, and you get like $5 T-shirts. They're like, well, those are worth like $20 each. I'm like,
no,
I stay away from those kind of things. There's a store we had here that had like returned Amazon boxes that were randomly packaged up or something like that. It was like random Amazon boxes, $25. Who knows what you'll get?
I do nothing.
Yeah, pretty much. Oh yeah. Also, another thing about Edith Massey. Two other facts John Waters brought up. Apparently, she was one of the sweetest people in the world, other than when she drank. She only drank a couple of times, but apparently a mean drunk. And also, when you drove around with her, she had this thing that drove John Waters crazy, where she would literally just list off everything she saw. She'd be in passenger, she'd be like dog, car, tree, house, car, tree, fire hydrant, sidewalk. He said that woman had like no internalization.
I want to kill you over and over.
Yeah. For Pink Flamingos, actually, John Waters hired Teamsters. It was like one of the first movies that they actually hired some of the crew for. in order to save money, they would actually bribe these Teamsters that on their way from the studio, they would actually, quote unquote, borrow equipment temporarily and loan it to John Waters so that they could have some nicer equipment than what they had. I mean, they would give it back and everything, but yeah, they weren't really supposed to be renting it out like that.
Oh, of course.
Yeah. And one of the Teamsters, too, they were kind of, all the Teamsters were sort of weirded out by what was going on, but, they're Teamsters, whatever union, they'll deal with it. But one of the Teamsters, John said, brought out his wife to the shooting one day. The wife walked up into the set and saw Edith Massey in the corner in the little dressed in her underwear in the crib and was like, "Hi, nice lady." And the wife turned around and looked at her husband like, "We're not staying here. We're leaving." And she forced him to leave and they never saw them again. Yeah. But like, something's wrong here. They have an adult woman and a baby playpen over there.
I mean, it's funny, but also what a bitch.
Yeah, I know, right? Could have hung around, talked to them and associated with them a little bit and see what was up. The end of this movie involves one of the most shocking scenes ever, and this is the scene that John Waters said got him as close as he ever would to those old horror movies where people were freaking out. This is the infamous dog do eating scene where Divine follows around a dog for a while and eats dog poo diligently. Actually, I got that written down better. Where Divine devours dog do diligently. Ooh, alliteration. Good for me.
Like for real or like chocolate?
100% for real, like fresh, warm out of the dog.
I just
look at picture number 3. That
I saw. I was hoping that was chocolate, but
nope, it is 100% poo. Here's the thing, yeah.
That's my button.
I watched the footage. Trust me, Divine did not enjoy eating that either. Not all of it made it in the mouth. Like probably, okay.
Why? Like what?
I will tell you about that. Well, John's not a monster, first of all. He asked Divine if that was okay. He's like, "Divine, do you mind doing this?" Divine's answer was basically a staunch, "If it's in the script, I'll do it, because that's how movies are made." John was like, "Well, that's dedication right there." The reason John wanted to do it, well, there's actually two reasons on this. One, he wanted a shocking scene, something that people would talk about, something that would get people like, "You got to see this in a movie. It's at the end, but you got to wait through the whole thing, but you have to see this. It's something you've never seen before," which is true. The other reason was, and this is actually a slightly more interesting reason, because they were part of the underground film movement. One thing the underground film movement was big on at the time was to push the envelope as far as they could while still staying legal. Hence that movie we talked about earlier where it would show like STD things and, birth to get away with showing full vag on screen.
Yeah.
Because it was educational, that way it was legal. Well, going through the legal books, John realized there is no law against eating poo on camera. So he said, "Hey, we can push the envelope and see how the people react to the legal act of eating feces on the screen." So in it went, because that was their contribution to underground movie making. This is what we found that was legal we can do on TV, and we're going to put it in or on the movie set. And apparently, this accomplished everything John Waters wanted, and maybe a little bit more. Shocked people, got them talking about the movie, and also got a law made about eating poo on TV in a movie.
Good.
See, but here's the thing, though. Here's the thing John talks about, and this might have to do with the fact it was a drag queen doing it. You're not allowed to eat poo in a movie in a sexual way. You can still eat it in like a humorous or a educational way, I guess.
Educational? This is how you eat shit.
Yeah, I guess so. But yeah, apparently the actual law, the way it was written up, or at least was back then, was like in a sexual way you can't eat. And I'm guessing this has to do with the fact people were weirded out by the fact it was a drag queen eating it. And it was one of those, "Oh, well, obviously it's a sex thing if a drag queen's doing it."
Which is a part of that's a problem. I mean, like, it's just, it doesn't matter who's eating it in what way. It's like, it's someone eating poop.
Yeah, it is. It's gross. I watched the scene. It's not fun to watch.
I will never watch it. I see the pictures enough for me. My imagination has done enough.
Yeah. The next day, Divine did have some worries, so he called the hospital claiming his son ate dog poop and what they should do. The hospital was like, "Well, rinse out some peroxide or whatnot. Keep an eye on the kid." How old did you say your son was? Divine panicked. It was like, 24, which was his age. The hospital was like, yeah, keep an eye on your 24-year-old poo-eating son. Get back to us.
24.
Yeah.
There's a thing, like, you could have said any age.
Yeah, right. Just same thing as panicking and be like, "I'm Jackie Kennedy." And even though this was not sexual in any way for Divine or John Waters, sometimes after this movie came out, they would get people coming up and being like, "Dude, that is the hottest thing I've ever seen in my life. You have no idea how turned on I was by that."
See, that's the test. Someone comes up and says that, you're like, "And you failed."
Yeah. John and Divine naturally are always nice people. Like, "Oh, well, we're glad we could, excite you in that way. But deep down inside, they're like, ew, I don't want to be around this person anymore. Ew,
Yeah.
ew, ew. Yeah, they're like, they want to turn around and walk away, but, they were kind of like, well, we'll humor them. Oh, yeah. Side note, someone has optioned Pink Flamingos as an opera, but it never went anywhere.
Good.
Can you imagine singing an operatic about eating dog poop?
Yeah.
Or inseminating women with an injector. Another thing about Pink Flamingo, it got a 25th anniversary edition, and when it was released in theaters, it was the number 2 movie that year behind Jerry Maguire and Head of the Rock. That's actually pretty impressive.
Head of the Rock?
Yeah, the movie The Rock with Sean Connery. Not the actor The Rock.
No, I'm sorry. I heard the movie title was Head of the Rock. I'm like, what?
No, sorry. Yeah, Head of the Rock. It's a movie about Mount Rushmore.
Right. That's what confused me. Like, Head of the Rock. What movie is that?
Yeah. Like, I've never heard of that movie. There's The Rock, the movie, and The Rock, the actor. Another fun thing about this movie. John Waters talked about, he went to see this in Japan once. And Japan, their weird censorship thing. One of their censorships is no pubic hair on screen. None whatsoever. So when he was watching that, John said that whenever there's pubic hair on screen, apparently this little censorship ball floats from the off screen, shoots right down to cover up any pubic hair.
Yeah.
And he said that this actually makes movies feel way more perverse because this little ball literally drags your eyes straight to wherever the worst part is of the scene. Yeah. He's like, honestly, I wouldn't even notice some of this stuff except this giant floating censorship ball goes right to somebody's crotch. And you're like, oh. And yeah, I can kind of see that where it's like, what's that ball doing? Oh, Lord.
Yeah, their censorship is so weird.
Yeah, he was literally like, you can show a snuff film over there as long as there's no pubic hair in it.
Yeah, like even in their cartoon stuff, it's like, okay, so let's make sure we cover up her bits. Meanwhile, she's being raped by a nine dog.
Like, John says they have the weirdest censorship over there, and he absolutely loves it.
Yeah,
because it's so nonsensical and weird.
It makes no sense.
Yep. Okay, one last thing about Pink Flamingos, real quick. A copy of this movie is actually in the Museum of Modern Art, and it is also part of the Library of Congress's National Film Registry in a list of movies deemed culturally or aesthetically important to American culture. It made the list in 2021, and John was quite surprised about this.
I mean, don't they try to save most stuff?
There's actually only 300 movies, I think, in the Library of Congress.
Yeah,
actually, I thought the National Film Registry was all movies, but I don't know. Hold on.
Well, I mean, it still would make sense. As weird as it is, it's still a movie of note. It's
it changed. It actually did change a lot of things. 850 films are what's in the film registry.
Cool. I mean, that's way more than you're 10.
Yeah,
there's 10 movies in there. One of them movies me up.
I mean, 850. That's probably almost every movie ever made. I would guess there can't be that many more than that.
Oh, sorry. First split second, he's being serious, and it took me a second. Oh no, he's not. 800 total.
I heard that Tony Rhodes what, you idiot? There's probably 850 movies released in the last 3 years worldwide.
Go all Stimpy. Was it red? Whatever.
You idiot!
Oh, wait a minute. He's being facetious. Whoops.
Another random John Waters story that I actually just heard this morning watching an interview. 1975, there's a movie called Snuff that came out, which was one of those fake snuff movies. And the tagline was, shot in South America, where human life means nothing. Kind of a problematic subtitle nowadays, I would guess. But After that movie came out, John Waters was at home, and all of a sudden he got a call from Roger Ebert. Roger Ebert was like, John, I need you to get me into one of these snuff films so I can see how it's made. And John was like, I don't think those things actually exist, Roger. He's like, yes, they do. I know they exist, and you're my ticket to go see one. And John was just like, no. So, yeah, kind of a random thing right there.
That's random. Another random thing. For some reason, that's actually kind of funny. Roger Ebert came up with a conversation yesterday at my father-in-law's birthday party, and I looked him up. I forgot. I had forgotten. He had jaws removed. He looks so weird.
He does.
I mean, I get it. Someone's jaws removed, of course, would look weird. No shit. But
he looked most people have a whole jaw. He
looked like he was just perma-smiling.
Mm.
And it was unsettling. And I felt bad. I feel bad for the guy.
He kind of looked like a Cenobite or something like that after all the surgery. Just you see him in the shadow and corner, and you're.
He did piss me off the whole video games art thing type thing. But it's but I mean that's he was expressing his personal opinion, fine. But
you can express your opinion even if it's wrong, like that one.
Yeah, I mean it's whatever, but it still irritated me.
Yeah, I was irritated by him saying that too, but that's just him being old. He's probably all bitter because he never got to see a snuff film.
Yeah, I mean, really a snuff film? That's your thing. Like
Yeah,
I must watch someone die.
yeah, right. Maybe he was just really high that day or something. He's like, I know, I'll just call John Waters. Yeah, maybe the part of the conversation we didn't hear is after John Waters said no. Roger Ebert's like, so what you wearing?
Right.
And that's going to be it for our first episode on John Waters. We made Nate gag this episode. That was fun. Tune in next week when we discuss if John Waters is a necrophile, Dorf Wharf on Golf, who John Waters planned on kidnapping, what's in the Pulp Fiction suitcase, and finally, what sex act John Waters invented. Come on back next week for that and more with part 2 of our John Waters episode. This is where the ending jingle goes. This is where the ending jingle goes. I don't know if we need one, I don't know if we'll get one, but if we do, then here is where it goes. This is where the ending jingle goes. This is where the ending jingle goes. I don't know if we need one, I don't know if we'll get one, but if we do, then here is where it goes.